Welcome to the podcast. Today we've got Luke Frey. He's really an executive trainer for people that want to grow franchising groups, right? If you have a bright idea, right? You have your idea and you want to take what you have, you want to develop it into a franchise, right? Luke and his team over at Bella Vista Executive Advisors will help you do that, right? And today we're talking about the process of developing a brand, what you go through to actually create a franchise, and he's going to guide you through that. Luke, welcome to the show.
Anthony, I appreciate being here. Thank you very much. And I'm excited to help people get started on this because franchising, it was proven through the pandemic. Franchises stuck around for the most part. They weren't hit nearly as hard as small business. So thank you for this opportunity.
When we look at franchising groups, for me, the benefit of it is that I'm not out on my own. Look, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, right? I started off, early days of life, and I've always been an entrepreneur. And for me, I have an appetite for high risk, right? I live on the edge of it, but I've got friends of mine who don't, right? Who want to be in the franchise, who want to have a business, but the idea of going out there, hanging your shingle, figuring out on their own, it's just too much. And for me, my judgment is that when we go pick a franchise, the idea is that, look, somebody's already vetted out a system to help this person develop a company, and it mitigates a lot of the risk that it takes to really go out there and start a business.
Correct, Anthony. What you're doing when you're buying a franchise is you're buying the brand name and the rights to use that name. And you're also buying a proven operating system. You don't have to reinvent the wheel.
That's right. That's
basically, that's yeah. And I see franchisors all over the place when they start franchising. For instance, my franchisor had been servicing medical linen for 25 years before they franchised. So I felt very comfortable when I purchased that business that their operations were down pat. After 25 years, they knew what they were doing.
That right there gives me some comfort, right? As I go out there and do that. So as we talk to the folks that are out there and they have an idea about developing a brand and they want to start a franchise. Look, I've got a great successful business. Maybe I've got a region, a market, I've got an idea that I think will be able to copy well, right? I have a product where I can show people how to make money simply, right? Because we got to remember, there's two different businesses here. There's one running a business, right? And so I have a sub shop, I have a dry cleaning, I have a linen service, I have a service or a company or a space that I develop, and then there's a whole different model in franchising. Right, that's a whole nother model to go create.
It is, especially when you're in a growth mode and you go from that one location that you've been operating into multi-units. And that's how you grow your business, and you change from that owner operator that you were talking about into an executive that's running the business that owns franchises.
So it takes a little bit, right? But what I always recommend is that when you're making this shift in life, right? Great. Let your ego get in the way here. It's not the business that I'm operating better, or I'm going to take what I do on a daily basis and do the same thing and give it a franchising comes with a whole complicated path of development, right? I mean, it doesn't come with just this, to get to a UFOC, right? The uniformed franchising offering, right?
FDD now.
FDD, right? Good. So what's that stand for now?
Franchise document disclosure.
Disclosure, right now.
Franchise disclosure document.
That's right. Franchise disclosure document. And that document really spells out what the offering is. Now, when a franchisor puts this together, it essentially tells you the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? You've got to be very vulnerable as a franchisor, and you have to be very, very clear about how you're developing this, because, later on, these are things that can get you in some real trouble as a company. And, putting out something that's not clear, something that's not, communicate properly and doesn't follow the legal requirements of an FTD can get you in some big trouble.
Absolutely. And you don't want that. And it's not only um, the FDD is there for protection of the franchisor, number one. So it's heavily weighted towards the franchisor. It is a legal document, but it's a government template. So it's not a binding contract between the franchisee and franchisor. It does state what the rights, what the rights and obligations are for each. Um, and if somebody is starting this and they're in the first stages of, they've got a great idea, great product, great service, great food, whatever it is, and they want to expand that, it all starts with the vision, Anthony. And where do they want to take this? Um, no matter what the product it is that they're selling, what is the end goal with that, and
So,
how do
so
they want to get there?
let's back up a little bit. So now, the end goal. Now, what do you talk about when you say end goal? So I've got whatever the service is, like, so whatever my niche
Mhm.
is. Right now, what do you mean by end goal? Where I want to
Well,
be? How big I want to be?
franchising is a tool that can be used for different things in business. For instance, my franchisor, they used franchising not to sell 100 units. They used franchising to grow their healthcare laundry base to all the major cities in the US. And after 20 years of doing that and expanding in all those areas, then they consolidated everything back and sold it all as one package um, to a private equity firm. So it was their retirement, and that's the way they planned it right from the start. Other franchisors want it for the revenue. I mean, franchising is a constant revenue generator, and they can build their empire and do what they want to do with those funds um, when they're successful doing that.
Great. So now you start to decide, all right, what's my vision, right? I want to do this to grow my brand, right? Essentially what I'm doing is I'm leveraging myself over multiple franchisees, right? In development, essentially I'm bringing on partners in developing the brand when you look at it, right? And the document you're going to create, the FDD, that's really going to be the agreement by which we all agree to move forward.
It's the roadmap on to be it's the roadmap to be successful. Yes.
So
Well,
it's gonna spell out exactly who's doing what, when, and how we want it done.
the good ones do. There's, like I said, the FDD is just a template, so there's nobody that grades what you put out other than the consumer. Uh, and the FDD, especially when you're getting started, um, and it's called an emerging brand. That FDD is your sales tool. Here's what I can promise you. Here's what's going to happen if you follow my operations manual.
All right, now I get a lot of people who jump in the franchising world, and they don't know how to pick what franchising they want. They just assume that every franchise I go pick, I go to a franchising show. I may decide that, I'm tired of the business I'm in. I want to go do something different. And I think one of the biggest faults I see is the people, the brands they go pick to become a franchisee, right? They go and they're an IT consultant. Now they want to go open a restaurant, right? And sometimes franchising groups will allow that to happen. And all of a sudden, that person gets 6 or 8 months into it and they realize, I don't like it. Now, some franchising groups, my judgment is that they are more concerned about cash flow and selling franchises than they are sometimes on picking the right candidates for their brand, right? Or they get too eager and maybe even too optimistic that everybody will be a great franchisee. Just let them get started. I'll make it work for them.
Absolutely, and that's a huge downfall for franchisors and the franchisee, because the franchisee isn't a fit and they're not going to be successful. But there is a group. It's just like any other industry, that if somebody is walking and they have cash to spend on a franchise, the franchisor will take it. What my group works on is to reverse that trend.
Yeah.
Is
I, it always backfires, right? I mean, of all the brands that I've built, the brands that are picky and pick the right franchisees that are funded properly, that have the right operational knowledge, that have the right financial the right skill set to be when if you're a little bit more picky in the beginning, it pays off huge dividends later on.
Absolutely, because you have the validation tools now. You have the franchisees that are successful. They've proven that the model can be successful, and that's every franchisor's best dream.
All right, so now I've got a concept, right? I want to go grow it. I start to pick the right franchise. Before I do that, before I start picking franchisees, what do I need to do to get started first?
The first thing you do is to make sure that your operations manual is ironclad and just ready to hit the road for um, your ideal franchisee. In my experience, and again, I was the first franchisee of Image First. I was not an ideal franchisee. We had worked together for a year, so we knew each other. I did not have. They wanted to bring somebody in as a franchisee that was a regional dry cleaner, already had the capacity to do medical laundry, and I had none of that. So we basically wrote a second operations manual for franchisees that were like me.
So I had no experience right now. So now they're already starting off behind. Their first franchisee, right, has no experience. Now the frustration of that is that now you're carrying the weight of someone who's not helping you, but if anything else, maybe even slowing you down. But because you're so eager to grow, you take that on.
Well, yes, and they knew me. That was the other key factor. Is like I said, we had worked together for a year. I worked with the father and the son owned the franchisor, and I reported directly to both of them. So it was a no like and trust factor for what we could do. And since they were such a brand new franchise, and I had the engineering background and the ability, we knew going in that I was going to have to create these systems with them. And so we just took that on as an extra challenge.
Well, I feel like that's how most of the companies I've ever developed have been, right? In that when I started, right, I think back to some of my early days, some of the employees I brought on, I didn't understand the business that much yet. It wasn't like I could go out and find a seasoned pro for the project management company CDO group when I started it, right? There was no such thing as outsourced construction manager. There was no such thing. And to go out and find someone who knew what they were doing was, I couldn't do it. Right. The same thing with a franchisee, they're franchisor, they're starting to grow a company. They may not know how to do it. So bringing someone else on like yourself to help them in those initial stages, right? Those
Mhm.
initial stages, while they're developing and they're kind of using you as a guinea pig. Is that kind of the game?
Guinea pig now or back when I started the
Back when
franchise?
you started, right? I mean,
Oh, I was absolutely a guinea pig.
yeah,
They had gone through enough to know how to create the FDD.
yeah,
They didn't understand what franchising was,
yeah.
and going out and finding the rest of the franchisees. It's a completely separate business.
Well, and that's ultimately, you know, some of you guys that want to build franchising groups, you're going to go through this. Now, some of that, my judgment is that, you can do this on your own, and you can do that, grow with folks just like like Luke went through with the group that they worked with. But some of that's also pretty painful. What I really have learned today is it's like those first employees that I had, they were friends, people I trusted, right? I knew them, I trusted, and I trusted that they weren't going to go tell everybody that I didn't know what I was doing yet, right? And that was kind of the joy of having those first friends, right? And essentially, what I would do is I would tape them to a stick, right? And I would they were like a scarecrow, and I'd kind of shake them, and I'd make everybody else look, oh, look at Anthony's got all these employees. But the truth was, they didn't know what they were doing either. And so at first, I did that. Today, my goal is to go find best in class. I hire the best in the industry. I'm looking for people that are, you know, literally top of their game when it comes to general contracting, construction management, or any of the businesses that we have. I'm looking for best in class. Now, that's only because today I can now slow down. I've got systems that I can communicate well to a person. And I feel that's the same thing with the franchising group. As you're developing the group, bringing consulting like you guys in helps them develop a clear path to go from those startup people that you're going to grind on to really finding best in class. It takes a little bit more to get from starting to bring in the first person on, but ultimately the first person on is way more effective long term.
Absolutely. And what's the hardest thing about starting a business, no matter what it is? It's not knowing what you don't know.
That's right.
And that's where we come in. And we're working with a group now that has employed a consulting group, I guess, for the last 20 years. But now they're wanting to expand into franchising, and they just can't. I use it like the metaphor I use. We're like a water tank. Consultants are like a tank full of water that's going out to water the garden of the franchise. This group of consultants can fill up that water tank to X level. It's enough to get them started. It's enough for the plants to start growing. But that franchisor needs enough resources to get beyond that point. And that's where we come in to help them do it right from the start.
Right. So now let's kind of go through and start to dissect. Let's come up with a great example. So here, let's work with you. I'm going to start Anthony's world's best sub shop. Right. I've got a vision. I'm not Subway. I'm not using Subway stuff. I'm not Jimmy John's. I'm not, I like some parts of that. I like the systematic approach to Subway. I like the freaky fast of Jimmy John's. I like some of the. I'm going to make a more customized, higher end sandwich. Mine aren't going to be $5, right? Mine might even be $15, right? They're going to be a little bit at the topper end of the market, higher end of the market. But I'm also going to bring in some really good material. Right. The stuff that I'm going to cook with are GMO free. I'm going to go organic. I have a design that really has it look and feel healthy. I've got an approach to it that has been very successful. On an average day in most of my sub shops, I sell well over 1,000 subs a day. I am there's areas where I operate in that I do very, very well. I have a 1,500 square foot restaurant selling 1,000 subs a day. And I've got a very easy system for communicating, right? It's great products sold by great people, right? The people that work in our families. We talk about, we really celebrate the family feel when you walk in. When you walk into our restaurant, you can smell the fresh ingredients, right? You can see the cleanliness and the freshness of the material. So the stores I've got open now, I'm doing really well. Right. I think I've got a pretty good system in place, Luke. And now I say, Luke, I want to become a franchising group. Right. And I want you to help me put a system together. And I'd like to grow. I'd like to, find regions where I can get a minimum of 5 stores in a marketplace. Right. I want to get some synergies. I would like franchisees that can open 3 to 5 stores each. I don't want guys that can just do one at a time. I'd like a substantial player that can give me 3 to 5 stores in an agreement to start. Where do I start?
Well, first of all, your concept on the franchise is fantastic because and you teed it up beautifully. The great thing about franchising is it's a community small business that gives back to the community, that adds value to the community, but yet it has a national brand behind it. So you're getting the best of both worlds when people get into franchising. Now, what we're going to do, you have your vision. Sounds like you have your processes fairly well down pat. We're going to define that franchisee that you want to be a multi-unit owner.
Got it.
Are they already in the industry? We're going to define who that person is.
So I'm going to start with, I want people that have been in the industry that have a passion for serving great food and build. I want look. I'm not interested in franchisees that are beating employees. I want to bring on people that understand diversification and people that understand culture. Look, our employees are what have driven every business I've ever had. Right. I'm not looking for franchisees that don't understand that. I'm looking for folks that will help our the people that work in our restaurants. I want our world to be better because the franchise we grow and the humans that work here have a better way of living, right? So we're going to find things like give our employees health care. We're going to do things like make sure our employees have a great way of working, right? They're going to work hard. Look, we work hard in our business, but I also want to make sure we take care of our great employees, that they have a future education and a retirement plan that helps them be successful.
And that's a great, unique selling point for a franchisor. You just laid out 2 or 3 or 4 different things that the franchisor is going to be touting when they're selling their brand. It's like you said at the beginning. There's a sub shop, there's a sandwich shop, because opening Anthony's sub shop, you're not only competing against Subway and Jimmy John's, you're competing against McDonald's, Hardee's, you're competing against all the other fast food. So what is it about you, much like Chick-fil-A? Chick-fil-A has a 5% employee turnover in an industry that averages 120% annually. How does that work? They did it because they set up their systems focused on keeping their employees long term, making sure that they only brought employees in that they wanted, that they knew would stay long term, that they wanted to stay.
All right, so now I got my day-to-day operations. I have figured out the secret formula for the vendors, what type of materials I want to put in my sandwiches, right? How to make those sandwiches. I've actually made kits apart for every loaf of bread that we make, right? We got this fresh bread that we make in our stores, right? I've got exactly how long it takes to make them, how to store them, how to get it from, right? I've documented my system for operating fairly decent, right? I might need some of your, I wouldn't mind you guys looking at it and taking a look at how do you get into my system and looking at, where might I have some holes, right? So I bring a consultant like you to look at my operating systems and how that functions. And what are you going to do when I do that?
We're going to coach you through it and find out where the weak spots are, where the bottleneck is. That's always my number one thing is what's the bottleneck in the process? What's the one part of the process that's going to hold everything else back? May not be scalable, but how do you make it scalable and take it from that point?
Well, I've got a decent way to operate the store on a daily basis, right? I can tell you about what to do and how to operate. If you come in one of our restaurants, right, the ones we've got going, they're running really, really well. Now I want you to see, I want you to follow these procedures. Look, I've got exactly what I want each role in a restaurant to be, right? And if they follow this, look, here's what a registered person does. Here's what we do when they show up at work. Here's what they do while they're at work. Here's the outfits that they wear. Here's what we do when we have a break in the line. Here's what we do when we need extra support. Here's how we communicate. All the aspects of being a great, cashier, right? And then maybe I have my line people, right? The people who work on the line, right? How do I accept that stuff and get along the line? And how does that sandwich transition from one spot to the other spot, and what does each role do on the line? When we're when we get there to start set up, what we do while we're in the middle of the rush, what do we do when we do, what do we do before we, before we close or when we have a break in the action? What are the things that we do to kind of, really set up a great system there?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And then once you have that system, it's all about, again, going back to the vision. How quickly do you want to grow? How fast what's your capacity to be able to grow? A lot of times what I see with these franchisors is they're promised the sun. Oh, your first year in franchising, we'll get you 100 units sold this year. Doesn't work that way. Not to mention, if somebody were able to sell that many in a year, chances are, unless they have private equity backing, they don't have the resources to be able to develop that from a professional business standpoint. like I said before, it's a completely separate business dealing with the franchisees than dealing with your customers at the sandwich shop.
In my judgment is that coming now with artificial intelligence, right? My belief is that will make the franchising world a lot easier as we move forward, right? Being able to train our franchisees, walk with them, communicate with, check on them on a daily basis, really watch what happens in a store. My belief is the next couple of years of franchising, artificial intelligence does something for us that we couldn't do at scalable. We couldn't find in the franchising world, you couldn't find people to train your franchisees and make sure they were successful, gave them a path on a daily basis, checked and communicated and followed up. There's just too many parts, especially from a virgin, emerging brand, right? A lot of them are just having, they're drinking off a fire hose themselves. A lot of these brands are, all of a sudden I got 10 new franchisees coming in. Now I got to take them through training, setting them up. Now they have 1,000 questions a piece, right? I got 10,000 questions. One at a time wasn't a problem, but now I got 10 at a time, right? There was one point at Jimmy John's, they were selling, so many franchises at a time that process became such a fast, the number of franchises that were selling was happening so fast, right? Keeping up with that, my belief is one of the biggest problems is being able to bring that many people on board, get them trained, right, and get them to go. Now we're going to talk about the hardest part. I believe is going from I want to do your franchise. I go out and you and your team, Luke, help me find the perfect brand. Right? I want to go do Anthony's Sub Shop. Right? Anthony's got the great thing. I want my place to smell. I want my friends to walk in and go, man, his sub shops are great. I want them to see my happy employees. I found the perfect Anthony Sub Shop brand I want to work with. Right now, I got to do what I believe is one of the hardest parts is I have to go pick a site.
Absolutely, and you're the expert in that in the construction end of it. But the successful franchisors will have the real estate people, will have the commercial real estate people ready to go. They'll already have established a real good strategic alliance with a commercial real estate person in order to get them into that right spot.
Well, I think there's a couple of problems there is that they find me a broker. They find me an architect. They may find me a general contractors. The combination of negotiating leases. You got to remember, the franchisee is coming to you for expertise. A lot of the brands that we work with, they don't understand the development world at all, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many times I see a franchisee go, all right, I can't wait to go find myself a site. They barely signed their UFO, their FDD. They've got barely got their financing in place. They're already out looking for locations. Right, they're in the middle of paperwork. They're ready to quit their job and go start on a franchise tomorrow. And all right, great. I found Anthony's Sub Shop. I'm going to quit my job tomorrow. I'm like, no. Look, we got a long way to go before you even get generate revenue. Let's make sure that you're not upside down in that process. So we want to go out and start looking for locations. Right now, remember, I want to open 4 or 5 of these locations. I got to take a look at where I want to put these sub shops.
Absolutely, and you're talking brick and mortar. Where's the traffic? What time of day? I mean, there's a whole industry based around this that you're familiar with, Anthony, is finding the right retail spot for that product that you're selling, that sub that you're selling. Are you on the right side of the street at noon?
Luke, I've
all
picked
kinds of stuff.
Hundreds of the wrong locations. I mean, in my career, I have picked hundreds of wrong locations. I mean, what I thought was going to be a home run was just the opposite. And sometimes I thought just the opposite. One I thought was going to be a dud turns out to be a home run. And there's a lot of factors that go into that, right? And it's a very much an art to picking a right location. And I think it takes some handholding from a great group of people to support that franchisee and do it, because you got to be careful of the people that you're working with, right? You got to be careful of the broker, right? Because the broker's got what's a broker got in mind? They want what?
They want the cash. They want that commission.
Right? They can care less about what's the long term, and they may show up and say, "Oh, I'm here to help you find the perfect location." No, but the truth is, they're looking for a commission. I can't tell you how many deals, I look at some of the deals that over the last, 30 years of me doing this, how many deals, because a broker had a relationship with the landlord, they're putting people in that shopping center or in that space that did not belong there, right? And it could be for multiple reasons. One, the delivery of the space. Right now, when we're looking at locations, we have to really identify, to your point, where exactly I want to be. Now, understanding my demographic model, right? Anthony Sub Shop wants to be on the going to lunch side of the street, right? Or maybe on the going home side, right? Somewhere where I want to start looking at my trade area analysis. What am I looking for? Look, that lunchtime crowd, right? So how am I doing with office spaces around there? How can I do with delivery services around there, right? A lot of the brands that we work with today are taking into consideration all of the aspects of being able to do catering, right? How do they do delivery, right? How to get people to see their location, right? When we look at a marketplace, if Chicagoland, for example, I could put, 100 Anthony Sub Shops in there. If I place them perfectly, right, I can create, what I call trade areas, right? Each little neighborhood or each path of travel may create a perfect spot for Anthony's Sub Shop. But if I put the one in the wrong location, I may cannibalize 2 or 3 markets together and put them in the wrong spot. Now all of a sudden I could take a 100 store market and maybe turn it into a 40 or 50 store market and cannibalize locations pretty quickly.
Absolutely. And the most successful franchisors have this system that you're talking about down pat. They know exactly the type of location they're looking. They know the one thing that I'll talk with, especially with emerging brands, if it's a brick and mortar, a pizza shop, for instance, they started out in their FDD at X square footage, let's say 1,500 square feet for a pizza shop. And one of the first things we'll talk about is, okay, how do you make that now 750, just like that first store that you started, so
That's right.
that person can get started in the best way possible, and then move up. If they're successful and want to grow into a store that's double the size, let them do that. But the best franchisors take the location piece, which is huge, absolutely huge for a retail franchise. It's retail, any business, location is huge. But the best franchisors take that piece and make it easy for the franchisee.
Well, and guide them, to not get, to make sure that they don't get over their skis, right? All of a sudden, they're looking at a 50 Anthony Sub Shop at 1,500 square feet. Now someone goes, hey, I got a space that's 2,200 square feet. You want to? Oh, by the way, it's a great location, right? But now the rents. Now you find me a corner where it's 50% larger than I need, and maybe what I'm looking for in rents are X, and now I've got X plus $5 or $7. Right now I've got an extra 700 square feet, and I'm paying another $5 more than I want to be paying a rent. Now there's always this very fine balance between finding location and value, right? Making sure that I'm not in a spot where I'm paying too high of a rent with too big of a space. I'd rather have a small place where the wheels are falling off of it than a big place that's empty all the time, right? There's something about finding a great sub shop where I can I'd rather figure out how to get throughput on a smaller location than how to beg people to come in on a bigger location, right? So keeping the franchisee in the right lane, right? Don't start out thinking yourself, right? Look, oh, I want to build a big one. Their ego gets involved. I want to build the biggest Anthony Sub Shop that ever exists. Now I've taxed myself with something that's unsustainable, right? A systemic, everything goes up. My architectural costs go up. My construction costs go up. My material, my operating costs go up. All aren't outside of the spectrum. So I think a great franchising group does a great job of keeping the franchisee in the right lane to make sure that they're looking, before they even start looking for real estate, They understand the demographic model they're looking for, right? The corners and trade areas that we want to be in. So please understand where you want to be as a franchisee. My recommendation to you as a franchisor is help find franchisees and their locations that are in their life path of travel, right? So finding a franchise location for a franchisee that's an hour and a half away from their house is ridiculous, right? Especially for someone that's on a first brand, first time doing this. We want it in their path of travel and make sure that they can get to it multiple times a day. They're there spending time with their crew, right? This isn't some hassle to get to. Out of sight, out of mind becomes what I think about first.
Absolutely. And that franchisee is also the face of the business. Yes, you might have a national Jimmy John's or Anthony's sub brand, but for the local community and the people who are visiting that shop every day, that owner is the face of the business. So the more, especially in the first 3 to 5 years during the learning curve and the growth curve, that owner really needs to be at the shop and involved. So to your point, being in the line of travel makes all the sense in the world for a brick and mortar.
Now, the next area I see people stumble all the time is franchisors that don't pay attention to the real estate deal, right? I promise that you can build an Anthony sub shop for $400,000. Now, the franchisee comes back and goes, "Hey, my bids say 550. Well, you said 400, right? You said I could build this thing for $400,000, and now there's $550,000." And let's go look at what happened. 9 times out of 10, almost 10 times out of 10, most cases, it's in the space I get delivered, right? In other words, when I get the space, what's the air conditioning? What's the bathrooms? What's the flooring?
Mm-hmm.
What's the lighting? What's the electrical service? What's the fire alarm, right? These are all spaces where, look, if you're a novice real estate person, this is one of the biggest areas of mistake. That your ego gets involved. I can negotiate a lease. I'm like, no. And the broker talks you into, oh, this is normal. This is how the market happens. I'm like, nonsense. You would not rent a house that didn't have an air conditioner. You would not rent a house that doesn't have an electrical panel. You would not rent a house that doesn't have a floor. Well, they call this a Texas shell, and they're going to deliver. They're going to give me credit for it. Oh, they're going to give me a cash credit for it. And what they don't understand is the credit they give them doesn't equal the work that needs to be done, right? 9 times out of 10, I find out that, oh, they're giving me $25 a square foot. And you think to yourself, oh my God, $25 a square foot on 1,000 square feet. Look, they're going to give me $25,000. That's awesome, right? But they don't realize that there's no air conditioner. They didn't put any bathrooms in. There's no hot water heater. There's no floor, right? They left it open. Today some developers love to create this half-baked concept, and then they kind of flattered everybody with, hey, here's $25 a square foot, or maybe even $50 a square foot. But you find out that just to get it to a white box will cost you $10 more than they're giving you.
Right.
And it's their way of saving money and fooling those franchisees that don't know what's happening yet. So again, we want to really make sure that you've got a great development partner as you walk into the real estate deal, so that you're not being talked into something that's out there. And franchisors, we want to make sure that we're not hampering your franchisees with bad deals that cost them too much money that they can't afford to operate later on. Or look, they've got $400 or $500 they want to invest in this. Now they find out that it's going to cost all of that just to get to construction, and they don't have enough money to operate, or enough money for marketing, or enough money to hire people properly. And they're now hamstringed before they even got their first site opened.
It's really important for the franchisors that want to be successful long-term to set up as many of these expert type consultants or strategic alliances, and to have these relationships before they ever sell their first franchise, so that they can then make that transition for the franchisee that may be coming from a 9 to 5 job, or that may be coming from a corporate world. The franchisor that makes that transition the smoothest is the one that's going to be successful long term, because the franchisee has a whole lot of other things going on in their head. They've got to run a business now. yeah, they may have been a manager for Procter and Gamble or a director with a few reports to them, but now this is their business. They don't have the luxury of falling back on Procter and Gamble's resources and saying, "Oops, I made a huge mistake. Let's fix this and move on." It's their business now, and that huge mistake could dry up their cash flow, could send away customers. So the franchisor that focuses on smoothing out that process for a franchisee to get involved in their brand will have a franchisee that's loyal to them for a long, long time.
Well, and I think that's the joy, Luke, of your group, right? The joy of your group is that you're helping them develop the systems by which they're going to find and help franchisees be successful. Look, your expertise in the brands I know you're working on, it's really about developing those amazing systems that have them start off right, right? You guys make sure that franchisors treat their franchisees and develop their franchisees and really create success. Those franchisors that set up those systems properly will prosper for years and years and years to come. Those that start off and create brain damage for their subs, for their franchisees, it's short lived, right? They start off with trouble. They're the guys who end up having franchisees that sue them. I can't tell you how many groups of franchise franchisees that go back and sue the franchisor because they lied
Sure.
to them or didn't support them or weren't there to give them. I mean, and that in itself is a painful process to go through, to have the people that you wanted to build a relationship with. Now they're all mad at you and they want to sue you because you set them up for failure.
That goes right back to setting up the expectations from the start. You could be doing, to your point, you could be doing everything legally as a franchisor, fulfilling all of your obligations. And if the expectations of that franchisee are realistic plus X, you're going to be paying for that plus X. So it's very important right from the start for franchisors to set the expectations, make sure that what they're putting in their FDD and what their franchise development team are telling these franchisees, set the expectations to what they need. If somebody's, in my instance, the first 2 years, I was I was the owner operator the first 2 years, and I was putting in 70 plus hours. A lot of that had to do with me because I didn't trust anybody to do my books. So I was also doing all the back office stuff. So a lot of that was on me. Um, but I knew what the expectations were going in, and that's key for a franchisor.
Well, just knowing where you're at, knowing what my part is, right? I mean, when I don't know, when I'm a franchisee and I don't know what to do, I make shit up, right? I take back from from the time when my parents yelled at me for doing something wrong. I go all the way back to there. Oh my God, I did something wrong, and that fear and that stress and that feeling of not being successful, not knowing where I'm at. I watch franchisees all the time. They don't understand how big a net to throw on things, so they get dramatic about everything. And when, as a franchisor, if I can guide them and
Mm-hmm.
support them through those scary times, through those infant stages until they get their feet on the ground, and as they continue to face big problems, COVID, right, shortages, brand identity, right, as I'm there for my franchisees, they'll serve me for years and years to come, and provide great income for our group as we develop them well. Well, Luke, I got to tell you, having you on and really look at developing great franchising groups, if people want to hire your group to come in and develop their brand, really help them create a dynamic franchising group that helps support their growth and take them to the next level, right? If they want to come in and just consult with you, what's the best place for them to catch up with you?
Best place is my cell number. It's
Go ahead.
51 area code 513-615-6750.
Awesome. How about an email address, Luke?
Email address is Luke, and I didn't think this through starting my business, at Bella Vista Executive Advisors, all one word, and advisors is with an O.com. That's why I give my phone number first.
You got it. We'll put that down below. Guys, you can find that down in the show notes down below. Please take a second and like and subscribe. If you guys know how hard our whole team in the background, Connor and Joe and Van and the team that put this together for you every day, if you know how hard they work, that like and subscribe means the world to them. We're grateful for you listening as always. Luke, thanks for being such a great guest on the show today for that. And we're grateful.